Right, so I'm Daniel Gillblad. I work as a research director at SICS, Swedish ICT. SICS is basically an acronym for Swedish Institute of Computer Science, even if we're not quite allowed to say that anymore. But let's see. So this is not quite working. Never mind. Big data has been the main driver of our research for perhaps the last 5 or 6 years, and it's becoming more and more important in our work. So basically, we have been working a lot with storage platforms for big data. We've been working a lot with how to do computation over big data, but we're looking more and more into creating value from data. And not only that, connecting all of these data streams basically means that we also need to do research to help connect all these huge data streams together. So when we started to look into this a few years ago, we also started to reach out to academics and industry and so on around Sweden to see, so what are the problems, what are the interesting challenges and so on when we're looking into big data analytics applications. And to do that, so about 2.5 years ago, we created a small informal network called the Big Data Analytics Network. It's comprised of a large number of... Oh, here we go. It's comprised of a large number of universities, a lot of companies, and so on. And we have been meeting with these people, discussing a little bit the challenges and things like that. But I think that one of the main things that we have learned is that the interest for big data analytics and for big data technologies is incredibly big. We're looking at companies not only from data-driven services like Spotify and Recorded Future and Gavagai and things like that, who have big data as one of their core interests. We're also looking at companies like SKF and Volvo and Ericsson and so on that really wants to provide additional value to their products through analyzing huge amounts of data that they can create within their production or services or something like that. So where does this put big data analytics in Sweden? So this slide here is an incredibly simplified version of the world, basically. So if you look at big data and how it started, basically, if you really simplify stuff, innovation originated at Google. They created MapReduce, they created a Google file system, they created Pregel and so on, technologies that are now used to crunch huge numbers of data. So then we have implemented lots of open source variants. Those are actually also driven largely by industry, not academics. So Yahoo, Netflix, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on created Hadoop and contributes to HDFS and Zookeeper and stuff like that, technology that we really do need. Now, these technologies are improved by serious players. In Sweden, we have, for example, Spotify, we have King, but also Airbnb and things like that. So there are a couple of things to take home from this. First, it's very industry-driven, and it's driven by the data-driven industry. Second, it's very US-focused. Innovation has largely originated in the United States. So where does that put Sweden, basically? Let's see. Well, first of all, it puts Sweden in a position that we're probably not going to be able to be the central place where big data technology research and development happens. But we have a few benefits. So we have an incredibly highly digital population. And not only that, all our industry is relatively ICT mature. It's very computerized. It already collects a lot of data, a lot of information. And they're relatively used to work with these technologies. Second of all, we are a world leader in communication technologies. It's undoubtedly so. And this is going to be more and more important because we're seeing now that the cloud, that is, storage and computational resources, are moving into communications networks, and things like that. So all this infrastructure is moving together to one big whole. We're going to look at ICT infrastructure, communication, storage, computation, as just one large infrastructure in the future. And Sweden has a way in here. We also have a tradition of data collection and quality. The best example is perhaps Statistics Sweden, who has been collecting really good information for a very long time that is representative over time. And of course, no one really thinks that, but you cannot really compensate in data quality necessarily with just huge amounts of data. That doesn't actually happen. We have a very good tradition of cross-sector and public-private collaboration. We have been doing this a lot. And a lot of the new applications, especially in the health sector and so on, they are going to be cross-sector. They're going to be private companies helping out healthcare and so on. And finally, we actually have a really good position to do something with data centers. We're already seeing establishments from Facebook and things like that. And once you bring this core technology and infrastructure into Sweden, we're going to have innovation happening around them. I need to click this a bit earlier, obviously. So basically, if we just look very briefly at what could the value possibly be, there are no numbers for Sweden that I know of, no one that had calculated exactly how much big data is worth. But if we just look at the big data-driven industry, and we take numbers that are representative for Sweden, investigations that have been done for the UK and similar countries, and we transfer them to Sweden, we can see that in 5 years, in big data and cloud clusters distributed around Sweden, we could expect around 35,000 jobs. If we get large mega data centers, it will increase even more. And not only that, we're also going to see a huge investment and a huge efficiency improvements in traditional industry. So it's going to be worth a lot. However, it's not exactly easy to make this happen. As I said earlier, it's not necessarily so that we can be the main driver in the world on big data technology. But we do have the position of being a country that can apply big data all over society. But to do that, we have to get better at connecting traditional Swedish industry with existing IT industry and the new data-driven companies that already know how to do this. We also need to connect to, for example, Berkeley and other academic institutions where research is happening at the moment and become better at that. And that also goes for companies in the United States and so on. So finally, I would just like to make a couple of remarks. So basically, everyone that we've talked to agrees that the impact of big data analytics is going to be enormous. We're going to see completely new services and completely new levels of automation, running complex networks, factories, providing help in medicine and so on. It's going to be a competitive advantage or disadvantage. It cannot be ignored. But something that I would like to point out is that in many of these discussions that we've had, the value, the real value, is not necessarily easy to realize today. It might be possible with today's technologies, but it would require a huge investment. So that's why I'm saying basically, it's going to be incredibly important. Big data is going to change everything, but we're not necessarily quite there yet. Be patient. Tools are getting better. We're getting better at deploying advanced analytics, and we're developing advanced analytics solutions. It will happen. Maybe not next year. And just a couple of words on where we think we're going. And I thought that the most honest way of telling you where the research front in this area is going is basically to tell you where are we going as a research institution. Well, basically, we're now creating a research center at SICS called Learning Machines, based on two things. So the first one is that advanced analytics is moving towards large-scale machine learning and real high intelligence and huge representations. So this puts enormous strain on the computation and storage platforms that we have. They need to adapt and develop. So when we do this, we have to develop these things together. That's basically why we're betting the next 5 years of research on developing machine learning and analytics algorithms on really, really large-scale infrastructures, running in practice, running on real data and on real use cases. And this is where we think the future is. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel Gillblad. Thank you for sharing that.